A singer plotted to humiliate a woman until she played the piano. A famous singer carefully planned to humiliate a theater worker in front of everyone. What happened next left the entire audience speechless. What turned a night of cruel intentions into an unforgettable moment? Let's find out. The spotlight pierced through the darkness, illuminating Sophia Bennett as she stood center stage. Thunderous applause erupted from the packed arena, thousands of phones creating a sea of twinkling lights. She smiled, basking in the adoration that had become so familiar over the years. Her silver sequin dress caught every beam of light, creating a dazzling display that matched her commanding presence. At 28, Sophia was the undisputed queen of pop music. Every gesture, every step she took exuded the confidence of someone who knew their power. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and striking blue eyes had graced countless magazine covers, while her voice had topped charts worldwide. Life had become a collection of luxuries. A sprawling mansion in the hills, a garage full of exotic cars, and endorsement deals that kept her face constantly in the public eye. Her Instagram followers numbered in the millions, each post generating headlines across entertainment news. Yet beneath the glamorous surface, something felt hollow. In quiet moments between shows, anxiety crept in like an unwelcome shadow. The music industry was relentless, with younger stars emerging constantly. Sophia found herself obsessively monitoring charts and social media, terrified of losing her grip on the spotlight. The pressure to remain relevant consumed her thoughts. Sometimes, when the world grew too loud, her mind would drift back to simpler days in her small hometown. She could almost hear her mother's gentle voice guiding her through piano lessons in their modest living room. The old upright piano was out of tune, but the joy of making music had been pure then. Those afternoons held a warmth that all her current success couldn't quite match. But such reflections were brief. Success had come quickly after her first hit single, and the industry's demands left little room for sentiment. The raw love of music that had once driven her now took a backseat to record sales and streaming numbers. In stark contrast to Sophia's world of spotlights stood Emily Carter. At 35, she worked behind the scenes at the Stardust Theater, managing sound equipment with skilled hands that once graced grand pianos. Few remembered that she had been destined for stardom herself. Her compositions praised by critics for their emotional depth. A mysterious incident had led Emily to step away from the limelight, choosing instead the quieter life of a theater technician. She never spoke of what happened, but the shadow in her eyes hinted at deep wound. Yet she found peace in her work at the Stardust, creating perfect sound balances for others while composing her own pieces in solitude. The Stardust Theater itself stood as a testament to faded glory. Its ornate architecture spoke of grander days, when it had been the crown jewel of the city's art scene. Now the gold paint peeled from its walls, and the red velvet seats had worn thin in places. But there was beauty in its imperfection, a quiet dignity that seemed to mirror Emily's own story. Like many historic venues, it had lost ground to modern arenas and their spectacular productions. Yet within its weathered walls, something authentic remained, an echo of times when music served the soul rather than sales. The theater waited patiently, like a sleeping giant, for its chance to matter again. The sharp click of Sophia's stilettos echoed through the Stardust Theater's quiet hallways. Her entourage trailed behind, their footsteps creating a symphony of urgency. The pop star's arrival had been scheduled for a routine sound check, but her expression suggested she was walking into a crime scene rather than a historic venue. This is supposed to be a performance space. Sophia's voice dripped with disdain as she surveyed the worn carpet and faded wallpaper. Her perfectly manicured hand brushed against a wall, and she quickly withdrew it, checking her fingers for dust. "My standards are considerably higher than this." Turning to her manager, she issued a stream of demands. "We need better lighting. These ancient fixtures won't do. The dressing room needs a complete overhaul. And please tell me there's proper temperature control." She paused, tapping her foot impatiently. "My contract specifies premium accommodations." As her team scrambled to note down her requirements, a haunting melody drifted through the air. The sound stopped Sophia mid-sentence. Piano notes, pure and emotional, floated from the main stage area. Despite herself, she found her feet carrying her toward the music. The main auditorium was dimly lit, with only a few working lights casting a soft glow on the stage. There, at a grand piano that had seen better days, sat a woman with long dark hair. Her fingers moved across the keys with a grace that spoke of years of dedication. The melody she played stirred something in Sophia's memory, a fragment of her childhood, perhaps when music had been about joy rather than record sales. Emily Carter was lost in her own world, swaying gently as she played. The peaceful scene, bathed in ambient light, created an almost magical atmosphere. For a moment, Sophia stood transfixed, watching the raw talent on display. But then something shifted in her expression. The initial curiosity hardened into something darker as she observed the way the music seemed to fill the space effortlessly. This wasn't the manufactured pop she performed. This was something deeper, more authentic. "You think you're a real artist?" Sophia's sharp voice cut through the melody. Emily's fingers froze over the keys as she looked up, startled. "Don't forget your place. You're just the sound technician." The words were delivered with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. As Emily quietly closed the piano lid and slipped away, Sophia remained on stage, her mind racing. She had recognized something in that performance, a pure talent that she herself had once possessed before fame transformed her into what she was now. The thought was unsettling. A plan began to form in her mind. This hidden talent couldn't be allowed to emerge from the shadows. What if the media discovered Emily? What if they started making comparisons? No, something had to be done. "We'll need to make some changes to the program," Sophia announced to her manager, a calculated smile playing on her lips. "I think we should include a special performance. Give our sound technician her moment in the spotlight." She paused, watching Emily disappear into the shadows of the theater. After all, everyone deserves their chance to shine, or crash and burn. Her team exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared question her. They had seen this expression before. Sophia Bennett would not be denied. As she strode back to her dressing room, her mind was already crafting the perfect humiliation, a public spectacle that would ensure Emily Carter never dared to touch a piano in front of an audience again. The morning after hearing Emily play, Sophia glided onto the stage with calculated grace. She found Emily adjusting sound equipment, completely absorbed in her work. "That was quite beautiful. What you played yesterday." Sophia's voice was honeyed perfection. Emily looked up, startled by the unexpected compliment. "I've had an idea. How would you like to perform during my show?" Emily's hand stilled on the control panel. A mix of suspicion and longing crossed her face. "I don't perform anymore. That's not my role here." "But it should be." Sophia pressed, moving closer. Her smile was dazzling, practiced to perfection. "You have a gift. I want to honor the hidden talents in this theater, the unsung artists who make every performance possible." She gestured expansively at the empty seats. "Think about it, your music touching thousands." After a long moment, Emily nodded hesitantly. "I suppose if it's just one song." "Perfect." Sophia's eyes gleamed. "My team will handle everything. We'll make sure you're unforgettable." The preparation began immediately. Sophia's creative director presented Emily with a complex electronic arrangement that bore no resemblance to her classical style. The synthetic beats and artificial harmonies felt like a foreign language under her fingers. The audience expects something modern, Sophia explained smoothly when Emily expressed concern. "We need to give them a contemporary show." The costume fitting proved even more unsettling. The stylist produced a dress that seemed designed for maximum discomfort, a riot of neon colors and metallic fabrics that made Emily look like a parody of a pop star. "It's very different," Emily managed, staring at her reflection. "Different is exactly what we want." Sophia watched from the doorway, satisfaction hidden behind a supportive smile. "Trust me, this will make an impact." During rehearsals, Emily found herself increasingly isolated. The stage crew, usually friendly faces she'd worked with for years, kept their distance, sensing Sophia's subtle dominance over the production. Only Chloe, Sophia's assistant, occasionally shot her sympathetic glances when no one was watching. The electronic arrangement isn't quite working, Emily attempted to explain during one particularly frustrating session. Perhaps we could simplify. Darling, Sophia cut in, her tone dripping with false concern. This is what modern audiences want. We can't have you playing some dreary classical piece. That's not what sells tickets. She turned to her production team. Let's run it again, and this time, let's add more bass to the backing track. Emily watched helplessly as they adjusted the sound levels, making her piano nearly inaudible beneath the thumping electronic beat. She thought of the beautiful Steinway piano sitting quietly in the corner, its keys untouched. That was what she knew, what she loved, the pure, unaltered sound of strings and hammers creating magic. Saying in her dressing room, Sophia was reveling in the chaos. Did you see her face during that last run-through? She laughed with her choreographer. She looks like a music teacher trying to be Lady Gaga. The team joined in her laughter, though Chloe's smile seemed forced. The costume fittings became increasingly elaborate. The stylist, under Sophia's specific direction, added more sequins, more lights, more outrageous elements to Emily's outfit. The final creation looked like something from a fever dream, a combination of circus performer and failed run experiment. It needs to be memorable, Sophia insisted when the stylist quietly suggested something simpler might work better. We want people talking about this performance for years to come. As the days passed, technical accidents plagued Emily's rehearsals. Backing tracks would speed up or cut out entirely, leaving her floundering on stage. Each time, Sophia would express sympathy while exchanging knowing looks with her production. Emily spent her evenings at home, sitting at her modest, upright piano. Her fingers found their way through Chopin, Bach, and her own compositions, music that spoke of real emotions, of life's beauty and pain. Sometimes she caught herself wondering if she was making a mistake. But then she'd remember the feeling of connecting with an audience through music. Surely some of that magic would survive, even under the layers of electronic distortion and gaudy costumes. Meanwhile, Sophia's social media campaign was building excitement. Her cryptic posts hinted at a once-in-a-lifetime performance and a shocking surprise that would leave audiences speechless. Her followers speculated wildly, while she sat in her mansion, scrolling through the comments with satisfaction. The final dress rehearsal was a disaster. The backing track skipped, Emily's microphone cut out twice, and the stage light seemed to malfunction only during her segment. She stood in the center of the stage, drowning in neon fabric, while Sophia watched from the shadows with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, Sophia announced to the crew, tomorrow's audience is in for quite a show. Her words carried a weight that made Emily's stomach sink. That night, neither woman slept well. Emily sat at her piano until dawn, playing softly, reminding herself why she fell in love with music in the first place. The truth in the notes, she whispered, repeating her father's words. That's what matters. Across town, Sophia tossed and turned in her silk sheets, her dreams filled with strange melodies. She saw herself as a young girl playing piano with her mother, joy pure and simple on her face. But the image would shift, the piano morphing into a stage, the intimate room becoming a stadium, until all that remained was the hollow echo of manufactured beats. Tomorrow would change everything, though perhaps not in the way either woman expected. The theater erupted in a deafening roar as Sophia emerged from beneath the stage in a cloud of silver smoke. Her platinum sequin dress caught every beam of light, creating a dazzling display that made her appear almost ethereal. Thousands of phones rose in unison, capturing the moment as fans screamed her name. "Hello, my beautiful stars." Her voice rang through the theater, crystal clear and commanding. The opening notes of her latest hit single pulsed through the speakers, and the crowd's excitement reached fever pitch. Laser beams sliced through the darkness, painting geometric patterns across the ceiling and walls, while pyrotechnics sent sparks shooting skyward. Sophia moved across the stage with practiced precision, each step perfectly timed to the thundering beat. Her dancers surrounded her in a carefully choreographed display, but all eyes remained fixed on her. She owned every inch of the stage, her presence magnetic and overwhelming. The massive LED screens behind her flashed in sync with the music, creating a hypnotic backdrop that enhanced her every movement. The audience swayed and sang along to every word, their voices joining hers in perfect harmony. Sophia felt the familiar rush of power that came with controlling such a massive crowd. She threw her head back, hitting a particularly impressive high note that sent shivers through the theater. This was her element, her kingdom, where she reigned supreme. As her final song reached its crescendo, Sophia struck her signature pose AU, head high, one hand reaching toward the heavens. The music cut off dramatically, leaving only her voice soaring above the silence. The effect was electrifying. When the last note faded, the audience exploded in applause and cheers that seemed to shake the very foundations of the old theater. Sophia took her bow, basking in the adoration. "You're all amazing," she called out, blowing kisses to the crowd. Inside, she felt the familiar surge of satisfaction. No one could touch her, no one could challenge her position at the top. As she made her way backstage, she caught sight of Emily waiting in the wings, already dressed in the garish costume they'd prepared. "Break a leg," Sophia whispered as she passed, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. She positioned herself just off stage, ready to watch her plan unfold. The contrast between her polished performance and what was about to come would be delicious. Everything was perfect. The awkward arrangement, the unflattering lights, the uncomfortable costume. Emily didn't stand a chance. As the stage crew rushed to prepare for the next act, Sophia's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Soon, everyone would remember why she was the star, and Emily would retreat back into the shadows where she belonged. First, Emily stepped onto the stage, the harsh spotlight making her feel exposed and vulnerable. The neon dress clung awkwardly to her frame, its sequins catching the light at all the wrong angles. Her hands, usually so steady at the sound controls, trembled slightly as she approached the keyboard. The first ripple of laughter started somewhere in the middle rows. Someone whispered loudly, "Is this a joke?" Another voice added, "What is she wearing?" The whispers spread like wildfire through the audience, accompanied by poorly concealed snickers and raised phones capturing her discomfort. Emily felt her throat tighten as the air seemed to grow thinner. The electronic backing track began, its aggressive beats feeling alien and cold. Emily placed her fingers on the keyboard, trying to find her rhythm, but the synthetic sounds fought against her natural timing. Her classical training clashed with the modern arrangement, creating a discordant mess that made her wince. The microphone picked up every hesitation, every missed note, amplifying her mistakes to the entire theater. She glanced at the sheet music, but the notes seemed to swim before her eyes. The tempo suddenly increased S, another technical difficulty E, leaving her scrambling to keep up. Sweat beaded on her forehead under the hot lights, and the uncomfortable costume restricted her movements at the keyboard. Each passing second felt like an eternity as she struggled to find her footing in this unfamiliar territory. From the wings, Sophia watched with barely contained delight. Her perfect red lips curved into a satisfied smile as Emily floundered on stage. She caught her manager's eye and gave a small, knowing nod. Everything was going exactly as planned. Humiliation was complete. For a brief moment, Emily considered fleeing the stage. Her legs tensed, ready to carry her away from this nightmare. The exit beckoned, promising escape from the embarrassment and judgment, but something kept her rooted in place. Perhaps pride, perhaps stubbornness, or perhaps the faint memory of what music truly meant to her. She took a deep breath, her fingers still moving mechanically over the keys. The laughter and whispers continued, but beneath them, she could hear something else, SEW's steady, grounding rhythm of her own heartbeat, reminding her of every genuine note she'd ever played in her life. She wasn't finished yet. Emily bowed her head, letting her dark hair fall forward to shield her face from the judgmental stares and mocking smiles. In that moment of humiliation, the stage lights felt like an interrogation, exposing every doubt and fear she'd tried to hide. The familiar pain washed over her as memories flooded back. Another stage, another betrayal. 5 years ago, her closest friend in the industry had stolen her compositions, claiming them as his own. She'd watched from the shadows as he gained fame with her music, while she retreated into the quiet safety of the theater's sound booth. But in those quiet years, Music had remained her faithful companion. Late nights alone in the theater, her fingers dancing across piano keys, creating melodies that spoke of both sorrow and hope. Audiences, no expectations, just pure, honest expression flowing from her heart to her. "I don't need to prove anything," she whispered to herself, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "The music knows who I am." The truth of those words resonated deeper than any amplified beat could reach. With newfound clarity, Emily lifted her gaze and looked across the stage to where the old grand piano waited in the shadows. Its weathered wood and quiet dignity called to her like an old friend offering shelter from the storm. Taking a deep breath, she stood and walked toward the piano. The electronic music died away, leaving an expectant hush in its wake. The audience's laughter faded to confused murmurs, then to silence. Even the usual rustling and whispers stilled as Emily settled onto the piano bench, her hands hovering over the keys. The theater held its breath, waiting. In the soft glow of a single spotlight, Emily settled at the grand piano. Her fingers found their home on the familiar ivory keys, the touch alone bringing a subtle peace to her features. The gaudy costume seemed to fade away as she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes floated through the theater, pure and crystalline. No electronic beats, no synthetic sounds, just the raw, honest voice of the piano. The audience, who moments ago had been laughing, fell silent. Here was something real, something they hadn't expected. Emily's original composition began softly, like a quiet confession. The melody spoke of loss and loneliness, of dark nights spent questioning everything. But as her fingers danced across the keys, the music began to transform. A thread of hope emerged, growing stronger with each measure. The song told her story, their story of falling down and finding the courage to rise again. Throughout the theater, phones that had been raised to mock now lowered slowly. A teenager in the front row wiped away an unexpected tear. An elderly man closed his eyes, swaying gently to the music. In the balcony, a young couple held hands tighter, touched by the naked emotion in every note. "Who is she?" whispered someone in the third row, voice filled with wonder. "Ishie," came the response, as others leaned forward in their seats, afraid to miss a single minute. The music swelled, filling every corner of the old theater. The stardust seemed to come alive, its weathered walls resonating with each chord. This was what it had been waiting for, AAT, non-manufactured pop, but music that spoke straight to the star from the wings. Sophia watched, her triumphant smirk fading. She gripped the curtain, knuckles white, as the audience slipped away from her control. Every note Emily played seemed to strip away another layer of artifice, revealing the truth about what music could be, should be. The song reached its climax, a powerful declaration of authenticity and resilience. Emily's whole body moved with the music now, her earlier hesitation forgotten. The final notes rang out, clear and true, then faded to silence. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then, like a wave breaking, applause erupted. It started in the front row and crashed through the theater, building to a thunderous roar. People rose to their feet, some calling bravo. Others simply stood in awe, still processing what they had witnessed. Emily opened her eyes, almost surprised to find herself on stage. The standing ovation washed over her as she rose from the piano bench. Her smile, unlike the practiced ones they'd seen earlier, was genuine and touched with gentle pride. A young girl in the audience turned to her mother. "That's what I want my music to sound like," she said, eyes shining. As Emily took her bow, someone started chanting her name. Others joined in, the same audience that had jeered now celebrating her triumph. The theater's old walls seemed to glow with renewed purpose, embracing this moment of pure musical truth. Behind the curtain, Sophia's team exchanged glances, their carefully constructed plan lying in ruins. But the audience didn't care about plans or production values anymore. They had experienced something authentic, and there was no going back. Emily stood on stage, accepting the applause not as validation, but as a shared moment of connection through music. In her simple honesty, she had achieved something far more powerful than any elaborate performance could have managed. She had made them feel. As the applause began to fade, a distinguished figure rose from his seat in the front row. James, his silver hair catching the stage lights, stepped forward and raised his hand for attention. The audience quieted, curious. What you've just witnessed is more significant than you know. His calm voice carried through the theater. That melody, that pure emotion, it's familiar to all of you. 10 years ago, it topped the charts as Sophia Bennett's breakout hit. He paused, letting the words sink in. Emily Carter wrote that song. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Phones emerged again as people quickly searched for the old song, recognition dawning on their faces. The whispers grew louder, spreading through the rows like wildfire. It's true, listen to the melody. She wrote a shooting star. No wonder it felt so different from Sophia's other song. In the wings, Sophia stood frozen, the color drained from her face as her carefully constructed image crumbled. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the curtain to steady herself. The truth she'd buried beneath years of fame and success now stood exposed under the harsh stage lights. She lowered her head, unable to meet the questioning gazes now, turned her way. Emily, meanwhile, quietly slipped backstage. She hadn't stayed to watch the revelation unfold. The music had already said everything she needed to say. Her footsteps echoed softly down the corridor, leaving behind a theater buzzing with this. The evening's performance had done more than restore her voice. It had finally brought the truth into the light. In her dressing room, Sophia sat motionless before the mirror. The spotlights around it blazed as bright as ever, but their warmth had vanished. Her reflection stared back, perfect makeup and styled hair now feeling like a mask she couldn't bear to wear. For the first time in years, the silence around her felt deafening. A framed photo on her vanity caught her eye. Herself at 12, sitting at a piano with her mother. The memory washed over her like a gentle wave, her mother's patient voice guiding her through difficult passages, insisting that every note should come from the heart. Music isn't about being perfect, sweetheart, she'd say. It's about being true. When had she forgotten those words? Sophia's fingers traced the edges of her platinum records, mounted on the wall. Each one marked another step away from that honest little girl at the piano. Success had become a hunger that consumed everything: talent, integrity, kindness. She traded genuine artistry for guaranteed applause, real emotion for rehearsed smiles. Shame crept up her spine as she remembered her treatment of Emily. Every snide comment, every calculated humiliation. They reflected nothing but her own fear and insecurity. Emily had something Sophia had lost long ago, the pure joy of. Instead of recognizing that gift, she tried to destroy it. I need to change, she whispered to her reflection. The words hung in the air, both a promise and a challenge. Success meant nothing if it left you hollow inside. Perhaps it wasn't too late to remember who she was before fame rewrote her story, to find that girl who played piano with her mother and felt music in her soul. Standing up, Sophia wiped away her perfect makeup with trembling hands. She needed to talk to Emily, not as a star to a technician, but as one musician to another. It would be the hardest performance of her life if being truly honest, truly vulnerable. But for the first time in years, the thought of facing the music didn't feel like fear. It felt like coming home. Sophia found Emily in the empty theater's back room, sitting quietly at an old upright piano. Her footsteps faltered at the doorway, all her prepared speeches suddenly inadequate. The same space that had witnessed her arrogance now felt heavy with unspoken words. Emily. Her voice was barely above a whisper, stripped of its usual polish. Can we talk? Emily's hand stilled on the keys, but she didn't turn around immediately. When she did, her face held no anger, only a calm expectation that made Sophia's guilt sharper. I was wrong. The words tumbled out raw and real, about everything, the way I treated you, the person I've become. Sophia's voice cracked. I forgot what music really means. I was so scared of losing my spotlight that I tried to dear. Emily studied her for a long moment, then moved slightly on the piano bench, a silent invitation. Sophia sat beside her, remembering countless hours spent just like this with her mother. Music isn't a competition, Emily said softly, playing a gentle chord. It's a language that speaks what words can't. When we try to own it, to use it against each other, we lose its real power. Her fingers found a familiar melody, Sophia's first hit, the one Emily had written. But this time, its beauty struck Sophia differently. She heard the hope and vulnerability she'd missed before, the pure emotion she'd buried under production and "How can you forgive me so easily?" Sophia asked, watching Emily's hands move across the keys. Emily smiled, a warm, genuine expression. "Because music taught me that every discord can resolve into harmony. We just have to be brave enough to let it." She played another chord, letting it ring. "Your voice has always been beautiful, Sophia. It just got lost under all the noise." Something tight in Sophia's chest began to loosen. Tears threatened to fall. But for once, she didn't worry about ruining her makeup. Emily's words offered not just forgiveness, but understanding, a bridge back to the person she used to be. "Would you?" Sophia hesitated, then continued. "Would you teach me to play this piece the way it was meant to be played?" Emily nodded, and together they began to work through the song, one phrase at a time. The late afternoon light filtered through dusty windows, wrapping them in a gentle glow. As they played, the distance between star and technician, between past and present, slowly dissolved. When they finally stood to leave, something had shifted. They walked together through the quiet theater, their footsteps in natural rhythm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, in this space where truth had finally won out over pretense, a different kind of music had begun. The following month saw Sophia in places no paparazzi would expect. Small community centers, children's hospitals, retirement homes. She'd leave her designer clothes at home, bringing only her voice and a piano. These intimate performances held no pyrotechnics or backing tracks, just pure music shared heart to heart. In her home studio, Sophia began writing again. Her new songs told stories of falling and rising, of masks worn and finally removed. Each lyric came from her own journey, the pressure of fame, the fear of fading, the courage to be real. One song spoke of a mother's piano lessons, another of finding truth in an old theater. Her vulnerability on paper surprised even herself. "Something's different," her producer noted during a recording session. "Your voice, Ellie, it's like we're hearing the real you for the first time." Sophia smiled, knowing he was right. The constant anxiety about charts and streaming numbers had faded. Now when she sang, she thought about connecting rather than impressing. The music flowed more naturally, each note carrying genuine emotion rather than. Her fans noticed the change too. Social media buzzed with comments about her new direction. "This feels so honest," one wrote. "It's like she's singing directly to me," said another. Her latest album, though less commercially polished than previous ones, connected with people in a deeper way. Music critics praised her artistic growth, noting how her new work balanced commercial appeal with authentic expression. At her piano each morning, Sophia rediscovered the joy that had first drawn her to music. Sometimes she'd play for hours, exploring melodies without thinking about records or sales. The instrument was no longer just a prop for photos. It had become her confidant again, just as it had been in childhood. Once a week, she met with Emily for informal duets at the Stardust Theater. These sessions reminded her of how far she'd come and how much Emily's forgiveness had taught her. "Thank you," she'd say sometimes, and they both knew she meant more than just the music lessons.